When we go back to Exodus chapter 12, verse 22, take a bunch of hyssop, dip it into the blood in the basin, and put some of the blood on the top and on both sides of the door frame. Not one of you shall go out to the door of his house until morning. So as I mentioned last week, when you actually kill the animal and then take the blood, and then you have to paint the door frame, and you have to stay inside the house. If you come out and see like, oh, this is nice, and if you stay outside the house, even though there's the house is painted with blood, you're still going to get killed if you're the firstborn, right? You have to stay inside the house. You can't stay out. So it is important. It is not about you. It's not about what kind of person you are. It's got nothing to do with it. It's just the blood is painted over and you stay inside the house is very important. That's why I mentioned that it is not about, whether I'm a good person or not. It's got nothing to do with it. There must be some criminals was inside the house. There must be some good person was inside. There was maybe some bad person inside. But it doesn't matter whether you are a Jewish person or not Jewish person. It doesn't really matter. Even Egyptians, if they are afraid of what they have seen, and they just did exactly the same thing what other Jewish people did, his firstborn would have been saved, right? So it's got nothing to do with it. So that shows the blood of Jesus Christ is the one that saves us. It's got nothing to do with who we are. So some people say, well, I'm not deserved to be saved. Of course, nobody's deserved to be saved, regardless of who you are. That's why we need Jesus Christ. And then, interesting part is, God is telling Moses to use the bunch of hyssop. What is a hyssop? What is the hyssop? Have you ever seen the hyssop? Actually, let's take a look at this one. Yeah, it's a kind of you've probably seen this. I'm going to show you. As a matter of fact, you could actually Google it. Just Google it. Just type hyssop, and then you will see. And you've probably seen this. Did you Google it? Yeah, you've probably seen this. It's like not in someone's nice garden, but where you're going to see it as like a weed. It's like it's grown in some mountainside, or like someone who doesn't really care the garden. This is kind of sort of a weed. So, but would you actually grow this in your garden? All right. So the hyssop is not something. It is really should I say? Let's just take a look at this one. I want you to take a look at the first king. First King. chapter 4. First King chapter 4, we're going to read from verse 32 and 33. First Kings chapter 4, 32 and 33. I'm going to read. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described the plant life from cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also taught about animals and birds and reptiles and fish. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. So this is about Solomon. He talked about so many different things. So when you look at verse 33, he talked about like all kinds of stuff, and he also talked about plant life. But he started to talk about from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. What it means is that the cedar from Lebanon is the most precious wood at the time. You would use this cedar wood to build palace and build very, very expensive and fancy and most prestige building in ancient time. So cedar to hyssop that grows by the wall, which means these are the weeds that are nobody cares. So he's talking about the most prestige wood to the things that people don't care. The hyssop is actually the things that at the time doesn't consider as anything important. Does that make sense? It's like from top to bottom, right? Most expensive to least expensive. So he's talking about the plants that are not really important at all. So this hyssop is just something that is really not important. But God told Israel to use hyssop and tie around a stick so you can actually, paint the blood over the door frame. But interestingly, there's another things that we can find very similar story. We're going to turn to Leviticus chapter 14. Eventually, someday we'll get here that we're going to discuss more in detail. Leviticus chapter 14 is pretty important chapter, and of course I'm not going to go all the details why this Leviticus chapter 14 is important, but Leviticus chapter 14 talks about it's an infectious disease. You can think of it as it's like a leprous. So this is how the law was given to Israel, how to recover, or whoever had the infectious skin disease or the lepers, and they were cured, and how they actually cleansed them after they were cured. And when they're doing this process, let's take a look at chapter 14, starting from verse 1. The Lord said to Moses, "These are the regulations for the disease. The person, at the time of his ceremonial cleansing, when he is brought to the priest is go outside the camp and examine him. If the person has been healed of his infectious skin disease, the priest shall order that 2 live clean burrs, and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop be brought for the one to be cleansed. Then the priest shall order that one of the bird to be killed over fresh water in a clay pot. He is then to take the live bird and dip it together with the cedar wood and scarlet yarn and the hyssop into the blood of the bird that was killed over the fresh water. It's very similar. Now what he uses, you have to use the cedar with the hyssop. As I mentioned, the cedar is the most precious, prestige, plants at the time. Hyssop is the worst things you can talk about plant. So he's putting these together, hyssop along with cedar wood, tied together, right? And why is he doing this? More importantly, let's take a look at chapter 14, 52. Actually, let's go to 49 and on. Same chapter, chapter 14, 49 and on. To purify the house, he is to take 2 birds and some cedar wood, scarlet yarn, and hyssop. He shall kill one of the birds over fresh water in a clay pot. Then he is to take the cedar wood, the hyssop, the scarlet yarn, and the live bird, and deep them into the blood of the dead bird and the fresh water, and sprinkle the house 7 times. Once again, he's using hyssop along with cedar wood, and then he tied this together with what? Scarlet yarn. It's a red color strings. You tie them together, and then with the stick, with the the hyssop along, tied with the scarlet yarn, you dip it into the killed bird. Right? Think about this. This is exactly the same thing as what they do in this chapter 12. Cedar is the most prestige wood. This represents Jesus Christ. Hyssop, the worst thing, it is not important. It is representing who? Us, the sinner. And tie those together with the scarlet string and dip it into the slaughtered lamb. And then with that, you paint the door frame with the slaughtered lamb's blood. You kind of understand why God is actually ordering them to do this. When you actually read this one without really paying attention, well, what's a big deal? And you will probably use anything, maybe just like, paint the door frame. Well, what's a big deal? It is a big deal because this is something God is ordering them to do. Right? It's not something they came up with the idea. This is what God told them to do. So there has to be some meaning. And then he just kept saying about this in Leviticus. And then he is doing this. Another thing. Let's go to John chapter 19. John chapter 19. We're going to read from verse 28. Later, knowing that all was now completed, and so that the scripture would be fulfilled, Jesus said, I am thirsty. A jar of wine vinegar was there. So they soaked the sponge in it, put the sponge on the stalk of the hyssop plant, and lifted to Jesus' lips. When he had received the drink, Jesus said, It is finished. With that, he bowed his head and gave up his spirit. What did he do? What did they use? Hyssop plant. Now you understand what this is. So it's little things, but when you actually pay attention when you read the Bible, you'll be able to actually, connect the dots, what that really means. So let's come back to Exodus chapter 12. Verse 25. When you enter the land that the Lord will give you as he promised, observe this ceremony. So, they have to do this ceremonial Passover all the time, right? Why? Why are they doing this? Correct. But that basically, what is God is trying to teach them? Because they have to do this every year, right? I mean, as you know, they're still doing today, right? The Passover is still being, all the Jewish people still do it until today, and they will continue to do it next year. But although they're doing this, do they know why God told them to do this? Is the question. It was telling them and showing them what Jesus will do when he comes, so they don't forget this. So God is trying to teach them, do this every year, for you to know one day someone will come and will fulfill and show the real things at some point. And then when Jesus Christ came, he basically demonstrated what this Passover means. But then, unfortunately, they didn't know what it was. They'd been doing this for thousands of years, but they still don't know why they're doing this. And they're still doing this today, but they don't know why God told them to do this. They just keep doing this without understanding the meaning of this. And then, when we go back to chapter 12, verse 22, it said, you have to stay inside the house until when? Until morning. Until morning. You have to inside the house until morning, and then you can come out. Right? So this means what? This is basically means, as we learned from Genesis, Christian's life starting from evening till morning. Morning is when you come out, right? So when the morning comes, that you come out. And then we're going to read from verse 29 and on. At midnight, the Lord struck down all the firstborn in Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sat on the throne, to the firstborn of the prisoner who was in the dungeon, and the firstborn of all the livestock as well. Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and then there was loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. This is important for you to remember. This particular verse. What does this mean? Pharaoh and all his officials and all the Egyptians got up during the night, and there was a loud wailing in Egypt, for there was not a house without someone dead. And where? In Egypt. Right? In Egypt. So that means everyone's house in Egypt, the firstborn, is dead. Whether it is a man or animal, doesn't really matter. Any house, the firstborn is dead. Is that including the area where Israel lived? Or not? So just let's read the last part of the verse 30 again. Just read it again. In Egypt, there was not a house without someone dead. So that means every house, the firstborn, is dead. You have to understand this clearly. So in Egypt is not where Pharaoh was living. It is in Egypt. That includes the area where all the Israel also living. All land. It's like United States. Everybody who's living in the United States, sort of. And everyone who's living in Egypt, firstborn is dead, regardless of who they are. Whether they're Israelites or Egyptians or, pagans, doesn't really matter who they are. Firstborn is dead. So then we can just raise the question and say, wait a second, then, Israelites, because they paint the door frame with the lamb, they didn't get killed. Absolutely correct. However, because of that lamb, that firstborn is survived. So instead of the firstborn of Israelites' family, the lamb had to die. You understand? So the firstborn was dead regardless of Israelite or Egyptians. Everyone died. Every firstborn was died. Whether it's Israelite or Egyptian, doesn't really matter. Every firstborn is dead. The difference is, Egyptians, there was a nobody who could die for their firstborn, so that's why the firstborn of son had to die. But Israelites, on the other hand, their firstborn was spared because of the lamb was killed on behalf of the firstborn. You see the difference? So generally speaking, the firstborn is dead, regardless of who they are in Egypt. It's just Israelites, someone else died, or some animal died for their firstborn. From God's perspective, every firstborn in Egypt is died. You understand the difference? So for us, we're in this world whoever were born, all the mankind, right? From the day of Adam until this whole world perish at some point, we're all sinners. So we are all destined to die. In this world, just like in Egypt, everyone will die regardless. But the question is, do I have something that can die for me to spare my life, or I don't? That's the difference. Will Jesus die for me and sparing my life? Then I'll be living. But if there's if there's no Jesus for me to die, then I have to take my life. I have to give up my life because no one else is going to die for me. Come back to verse 31. During the night Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron and said, "Up, lead my people, you and the Israelites. Go, worship the Lord as you have requested." Now he's giving up everything. Now go. Before he said, like, well, you can go, but leave the animal. You can go, but leave everything behind, right? But now, no conditions. Go. Go and worship. He just given up and he said, this is it. I can't handle this anymore. Just leave. Do whatever you request. Take your flocks and herd as you have said. Go and also bless me. So when he said bless me, through who? Who's going to bless? Israelites going to bless? Or the God who believe, the God that Israelites believe will bless me? Is he asking them to pray to your God to bless me, or is he asking Israelites to bless him? Which one? He's requesting you pray to your God to pray for me and bless me. So it's just big change from where we start off, from chapter 5, right? He said, who's that crap that you're talking about? The God of Israel. It's like, God of Hebrews. Who's that? I don't know. From there, now he's asking, pray for me, right? Now he changes significantly after all this time, right? Now God is teaching him clearly and telling him who I am. Now that you know I am the Lord. That's what he's been teaching, right? And verse 34. So the people took their dough before the yeast was added and carried it on their shoulder and kneading through, wrapping the clothing. The Israelites did as Moses instructed and asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and gold for clothing. The Lord has made the Egyptians favorably disposed towards the people, and they gave them what they asked for, so they plundered the Egyptians. The Israelites journeyed from Ramses to Sukkot. There were about 600,000 men on foot, besides women and children. Many other people went up with them, as well as large drove of livestock, both flocks and herds, with the dough they had brought from Egypt. They baked a cake of unleavened bread. Dough was without yeast, because they had been driven out of Egypt and did not have time to prepare food for themselves. Now the length of time the Israelites people lived in Egypt was 430 years. At the end of 430 years, to at the very day, all the Lord divisions left Egypt, because the Lord kept vigil that night to bring them out of Egypt. On this night all the Israelites are to keep vigil to honor the Lord for the generation to come. So when you look at this one, so is that means all the sons of Jacob who moved from Canaan to Egypt, when did they come down to Egypt? $430 years ago. When? On the very same day. What that very same day is that? That's the day of the Passover. Right? That's the day of Passover. They actually came down from Canaan to Egypt, because that's the day that they came out. Right? So 430 years, on that very day, they came out of. So that means The people who moved from Canaan to Egypt is the day they actually moved from Canaan to Egypt on Passover Day. And there are about 600,000 men on foot, besides the women and children. So if we include women and children and older people, we estimated probably about, what? About 200,000 at the minimum. Right? That's a large number of people. How many people came down from Canaan to Egypt? When you take a look at Genesis chapter 46, verse 26 and 27, all those who went to Egypt with Jacob, those who were his direct descendants, not counting his son's wife, numbers 66 persons, with the 2 sons who had been born to Joseph in Egypt, the member of Jacob's family, which went to Egypt, were 70 in all. So from 70 to 60,000, not including any children or women or older people. So during those 430 years, people grown so much. Huh? 600,000. So during that 430 years, the life of Egypt, people grew so big. But now, when they're coming out, what kind of bread did they bring it out with? Unleavened bread. Now, remember when we go over the chapter 12, what kind of bread should they be eating on the day of Passover? Unleavened bread. And right after that Passover, unleavened bread festival starts, right? For 7 days. And during that time, you cannot have this yeast unleavened. You cannot leave in your house, and you cannot eat any leavened bread. You have to eat unleavened bread. Why is that? I mentioned last week what unleavened bread means. Right? What does unleavened bread means? So what does unleavened bread means? What is unleavened? The yeast. What does that mean? I mentioned it was the wrong teachings, right? It was a wrong teaching from the Pharisees, right? And I mentioned it was a sin. It represents sin, right? Hypocrisy. And then it represents sin. So unleavened bread. So that means without sin. Without sin. So on Passover day, you have to eat unleavened bread. Why? Because Jesus Christ is unleavened bread. He's without sin. And right after the Passover unleavened bread festival starts and the feast starts, you have to eat unleavened bread as well. That means because of Jesus Christ's death on the cross, we became sinless as well. Anyone who believes in Jesus Christ, regardless of who you are, your sin has been cleansed. So, you became a person without sin, without leaven. So you have to eat unleavened bread. You must not leave yeast or leaven in your house at all. You have to remove it completely because you became a sinless person. Not because you're righteous because of the Jesus Christ. You're called to be righteous and you're called to be sinless person. Continue on. Verse 43. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, these are the regulations for the Passover. No foreigner is to eat of it. Any slave you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised him, but the temporary resident and the hired worker may not eat of it. This is also important. Let's read it one more time and see why is it important. Verse 44. No foreigner is to eat of it. Any slave you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised him, but a temporary resident and a hired worker may not eat of it. What does that mean? So obviously Israelites can eat, for sure, right? But now, any slave you have bought may eat of it. So, this means you don't have to be Israelites, but anyone the Israelites bought as a slave can eat. Right? So does that mean, is this person Israelites or non-Israelites? It could be Israelites or it could not, it may be not Israelites. It doesn't necessarily have to be who those people are, because Israelites themselves become a slave as well. But at the same time, the slave does not necessarily have to be Israelites. That includes anyone, right? But there's exceptions. The temporary residents and hired worker cannot eat of it. What kind of law is this? So let's turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 6. First Corinthians chapter 6. Verse 20. You were bought at a price, therefore honor God with your body. What? You are bought. What does that mean, we're bought? Jesus Christ paid the price. He paid the price of his own blood to buy us. Right? He paid the price for us to buy our souls and our spirit. So he had to pay the big price for me and for you and for every one of us. And going back to what we just read, any slave you have bought may eat of it after you have circumcised them. So what does that mean? You have to pay the price to buy this person as a slave, right? You pay the price to buy the slave. And then not only you bought them, you also circumcised them. We went over the importance of the circumcisions. The circumcision was basically means the crucifixion of Jesus Christ. He was cut off and shed his own blood, right? Life was cut off, right? So this slave bought with price is represent who? It's us, the church, right? Whoever believes in Jesus Christ, the church. You can eat of it. You participate in Passover. But temporary resident and hired worker, you don't belong here. Because you don't participate in this price. You're not participate in this ownership of that, the master. Slave, you own them. Temporary resident and the hired person is don't belong. They come and go, right? They don't stay. They don't have any ownership. But when Jesus Christ died and he paid the price to bought us, we became ownership of him. Those are the people who can participate in Passover. Verse 46, it must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house. So you have to stay inside the house to eat the meat, right? So, when we stay inside, what does that mean? That we have to stay inside the house and eat. What this means? You have to stay inside and eat. Correct. You cannot stay outside to eat the meat. You have to stay inside, right? Now, let's just take a look at when in New Testament, right? In New Testament, when you pray, and then you pray to get something, right? What do you have to do when you pray to get something? When you pray, God will give you everything what you pray for? Then what do you get when you pray? How should we get? We normally say, pray and you'll be given. That's what we've been taught, right? So let's go back to John chapter 15 for a second. John chapter 15, verse 7. It said, "If you remain in me, and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be given to you." And this is typically what we've been taught. When you pray, you will be given. But when you read this one carefully, what is the condition? If you remain in me and my words remain in you, right? That is the precondition. You have to stay in him and the word has to be in you first. Then you pray, then you'll be given. So this means It's not like you pray anything, then you'll be answered. But rather, if you stay in Him and His Word is in you, then when you pray, you'll be given. So imagine, if His Word is in you and you are in Him, do you think you're going to just ask for something like out of my own envy and out of my own selfishness? Or you're going to look for the something that kind of like, coincide with what He's willing, and we're trying to pray for something, God is willing to do. So that is the difference between when you just pray for anything versus when you actually stay in Word, and when you stay in the Christ and when you pray. That makes a difference, right? So, turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 3. Second Corinthians chapter 3. Are we beginning to commend ourselves again? Or do we need, like some people, letter of recommendations to you or from you? You yourself are our letter, written on our hearts, known and read by everybody. You show that you are a letter from Christ and the result of our ministry, written not with ink, but with Spirit of the living God, not on tablets of a stone, but on tablets of a human heart. Such confidence as this is our through Christ before God. Not that we are competent in ourselves to claim anything for ourselves, but our competence from God. He has made us competent as ministers of a new covenant, not of the letter, but of the Spirit. For the letter kills, but the Spirit gives life. So what does it say? Letter kills. What is this letter? What does this letter mean? Which letter is killing? What is this letter he's referring to? So imagine, Apostle Paul is talking about something previously. Which one he's talking about? He's talking about the letter was written on the tablet. The letter that written on the tablet, what is that? The law. The law. The law. The God's law is talking about. The letter, the God's law. So what is God's law? That is obviously, that is Torah. God's law, which is the Old Testament. What it means is the letter itself, the word that was written, will kill you. If you know this word, this will not save you at all. That's exactly what happened to Pharisees. They read the word, they meditated the word, right? But they did not understand what it means. So that letter they knew killed them. So the letter itself, it is not going to give you a life. It's the Spirit who gives a life. So only through the Holy Spirit you will understand what this letter means. But if you literally study these words this letter will kill you. But if you actually believe in Jesus Christ that is written all over the Old Testament, then you will receive the Spirit and you will receive a life. And you come across a lot of people who says, I read the Bible several times. You will come across the people who knows the Bible very well. And you will find the scholars, professors, who's teaching in seminary. But they deny the power of the Word. They deny the life of Jesus Christ. You will come across a lot of people like that. They have knowledge. They understand the Bible. They read the Bible. How come? If you read the Bible correctly, then you will find Jesus. And you will bow down before Him because He teaches you who He is. Then you will learn to fear Him, just like the Pharaoh did. But if you don't get those messages, if you just read the word, letters, you're not going to find it. And that letter will kill you. Come back here. Verse 46, Exodus chapter 12. It must be eaten inside one house. Take none of the meat outside the house, which means, this is the one that I was just explaining. You have to stay in Christ. You have to stay in Him. This is why John chapter 15 talked about, I am the vine, you are the branch. You have to stay in Him. You can't just stay outside and, hoping that you will bear fruit. You will never going to bear fruit without the vine. So you have to do what? You have to stick to the vine, right? Even you meditate the Word, you have to stay in spirit to read. If you just read the Word may kill you. Do not break any of the bones. The whole community of Israel must celebrate it. So you cannot break the bone. You have to keep the bones. Why? This is why John chapter 19 was recorded. Let's go to John chapter 19. John chapter 19 talked about death of Jesus Christ on the cross. And then verse 31 and on. Now it was the day of the preparations, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jews did not want the bodies left on the cross during the Sabbath, they asked the Pilate to have the legs broken and the bodies taken down. The soldiers, therefore, came and broke the legs of the first men who had been crucified with Jesus, and then those of the others. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Jesus' legs was not broken. This is why the Passover lamb cannot break the bones, because this will be fulfilled on the cross. He cannot touch Jesus' body, because it is not punished by man, it was punished by God. Jesus Christ received the punishment from God, not from Roman soldiers or from the Israelites. God is the one who punished him on behalf of us, because God is a righteous God, and he has to punish for the sin. He cannot just ignore it. He cannot just say, well, I forgive you without paying the price. Someone's got to pay the price. Who's paying the price? Jesus Christ is paying the price. So the punishment he received from God, the Father, since he was not punished by the man, no one can touch his bones. And as a side note, when Jesus Christ died on the cross, who was on the cross next to him? The two criminals. Do you know why Jesus Christ had to die among those two criminals? Think about it. Why Jesus Christ had to die with those two criminals? Well, it's kind of a weird question, right? It's like, how do I know? But I want you to think about it. Think about this, right? Two criminals that die alongside with Jesus Christ, right? Out of those two criminals, right? They both cursed initially, correct? But one of them, at the end, he said, "Remember me." And because of what he said, Jesus respond to him what? Exactly. So one was saved, right? Two criminals, they crucified, they both supposed to die. But one criminal died with his own sin, which he was not saved. The other criminal, although he was a sinner and was a criminal, supposed to die, and he cursed Jesus initially, but later time, he asked Jesus, "Remember me," because of his confession at the end. He believed that Jesus Christ was the Son of God. Because of that, he was saved. He shows the status of sinners. He shows the status of the sinners. Those two sinners, those two criminals represent us. One who doesn't believe and die and perish with his own sin. The other sinner, the other criminal, also supposed to die with his own sin, but because he believed in Jesus Christ, at the end, he was saved. Do you see the picture? Let's come back to Exodus chapter 12 again. Verse 48. An alien living among you who wants to celebrate the Lord's Passover must have all the males in his household circumcised. Then he may take part like one born in the land. No uncircumcised male have eat of it. The same law applies to the native born and the alien living among you. So according to this law, can alien could eat Passover lamb? Or only Israelite could eat the Passover lamb? How? Exactly. So it doesn't matter whether you're Israelites or you're non-Israelites. Even the non-Israelites can eat the Passover lamb as long as you are circumcised. I mentioned the circumcision represent what? Crucifixion of Jesus Christ. Whoever gone through that Jesus Christ's blood, you can participate just like Israelites and eat the Passover lamb. So this represent what? Israelites, which is the physical Israel, which is Israel as we know as a country. These people who are not Israelites, that represent the church, who can participate in Passover and eat the Passover lamb as long as they go through the circumcision. So the salvation is not only for the Israelites, but for the people who wants to participate in Passover. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. And on that very day the Lord brought the Israelites out of Egypt by their division. So verse 50 at the beginning, what does he say? All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. That verse 50 is important. All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. This is what they have learned throughout the life of 40 years in the desert, to do what God told them to do. Chapter 13. The Lord said to Moses, "Consecrate to my every firstborn male, the first offering of every womb among the Israelites belong to me, whether man or animal." Then Moses said to the people, "Commemorate this day, the day that you came out of Egypt, out of the land of slavery, because of the Lord brought you out of it with the mighty hands. Eat nothing containing yeast. Today, this is the month of Abib. You are leaving." So, God is telling them, consecrate to me every firstborn male, the first offspring of every womb among the Israelites belongs to me, whether man or animal. Why? Why not secondborn? Why has to be firstborn? Is there a reason why only firstborn has to be God's? Whether it's a man or animals, the firstborn has to be God's. It doesn't belong to us, it belongs to God. The reason is, the answer is in New Testament. Romans chapter 8. Romans chapter 8. We're going to read from verse 28 and on. Romans chapter 8, verse 28 and on. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brothers. And those he predestined, he also called. Those he called, he also justified. Those he justified, he also glorified. Huh? What did he say? What is he saying? For those God foreknew, he also predestined to be conformed to the likeness of his Son. Who's that? Who's that? That's Jesus. That he might be the firstborn among many brothers. So he's what? Jesus is what? God's firstborn. Jesus is the God's firstborn. This is why any firstborn, whether it's a man or animal, is belong to God. Because Jesus belongs to God. It does not belong to man. It belongs to God. But interestingly, when you turn to James chapter 1, James chapter 1, verse 18. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruit of all he created. He's making us to be the first fruit. So the first thing belongs to God, right? Firstborn belongs to God. The first fruit is also belong to God. So which means Jesus belongs to God. Jesus does not belong to us. Jesus belongs to God. But he's making us to be the first fruit, which means the first fruit belongs to who? To man or to God? To God. So that means we belong to who? To him. We belong to him as well. Not only Jesus belonged to him, but also we belong to him as well. So he's making Jesus Christ as the firstborn, but he's also making us to be the first fruit, which means we all belong to him. Come back to Exodus chapter 13, verse 5. When the Lord brings you into the land of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Hivites, and Jebusites, the land he swore to your forefather to give you, a land flowing with milk and honey, you are to observe this ceremony in this month. For 7 days eat bread made without yeast, and the seventh day hold a festival to the Lord. Eat unleavened bread during those 7 days. Nothing with yeast in it is to be seen among you, nor shall any yeast be seen anywhere within your borders. On that day, tell your son, I do this because of what the Lord did for me when I came out of Egypt. This observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead that the law of the Lord is to be on your lips. For the Lord brought you out of Egypt with his mighty hand. You must keep this ordinance at the appointed time, year after year. I just explained this to you before, right? Why God is doing what he's doing, right? Unleavened bread, why they have to keep it outside, and why they can't keep the yeast in their house, and things of nature, right? And how long he has to keep it? For 7 days. Once again, remember I talked about number 8, right? So the Passover is from 14th. and starting 15 for 7 days, right? So the feast starts from 1 plus 7 equal 8, right? So the salvation starts with 8. Now, what God is asking them to do is, you put a sign on your hand and reminder of the forehead. What is that? How do you do that? Should we just write the scripture word on our forehead and our hands? What should we do? So, God said, we need to, when you look at verse 9, the observance will be for you like a sign on your hand and a reminder on your forehead, that the law of the Lord to be on your lips. Have you ever heard of a word Teflon? No? It is. It is. You see my screen? Everyone can see? Yeah. Have you ever seen like this? The guy has a... This is... He's in the army, he's a soldier, but doesn't necessarily have to be soldier. Any Israelites do this. This is called a Teflon. You see this? This is the word. What does it look like? Well, obviously, this is the Hebrew word, so it's very difficult to read, right? This means shh. Take a look at the alphabet table that I gave you. What does it look like? Exactly. Shin. Right? This is a shin. So, they actually have this on their forehead and they're on hands. Even here. You see this? On their hand? So they wrap around their hands, and what do you think he's holding? No, this is not Torah, this is the prayer book. Yeah, this is a prayer book. So he's just reading this while he's doing this. You will see this very commonly with Jewish people. So this is called a Teflon, but Teflon inside, let me see if I have, let me see if I can show you other things here. I used to have it. I lost all the valuable things. Oh, here it is. Okay. Let me share this. You see it? So this is the Teflon that you saw on his forehead and in his arm. So inside there's a something that's just a little bit, the rolled paper inside this Teflon. You know what's in there? Let's take a look what's in there. Let's take a look at Deuteronomy. Teflin, Teflon, I believe. Deuteronomy chapter 6. Verse 4 and on. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength. These commandments that I give you today are to be upon your hearts. Impress them on your children. Talk about them when you sit at home, when you walk along the road, when you are lie down, and when you get up. Tie them as a symbol on your hands and bind them on your forehead. Write them on the door frame of your houses and on your gates. When the Lord your God brings you into the land he swore to your father, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, to give you, a land with large flourishing cities you did not build, a house filled with all kinds of good things you did not provide, a well you did not dig, and a vineyard and olive groves you did not plant them. When you eat and are satisfied, be careful that you do not forget the Lord who brought you out of Egypt, out of the land of the slavery. Fear the Lord your God. Serve him only and take your oath in his name. Do not follow other gods and gods of the people around you. For the Lord your God who is among you is a jealous God, and his anger will burn against you, and he will destroy you from the face of the land. Do not test the Lord your God as you did at Massah. Be sure to keep the commands of the Lord your God and the stipulations and decrees he has given you. This is what is written there. So I'm going to show you another things. You see this? Yes? No? Okay. This is the parchment that is rolled that you saw from Teflon. So obviously this is a Hebrew word, so it's reading from right to left. You see the very first character? Look, that's a shin. You know why? Because this, when we read Deuteronomy chapter 6 verse 4, it starts with the "Hear, O Israel," right? The word "Hear, O Israel" means it starts with shin. Have you ever heard of whatchamacallit, what is it? Shema? The word Shema? Have you ever heard of a Shema? Never heard of it? The "Hear, O Israel" means Shema Israel. Shema means hear. Shema Israel means hear, O Israel. Yehovah Eloheinu, Yehovah Ehad. This is the very first word that we just read in verse 4. Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God, the Lord is one. So that's why that on the Tefillin you will see Shin character, because this is the word that starts with Shema. Hear, O Israel. So, have you ever seen, I'll show you another one. When you actually come across the building or office, when you go to, let me see if I can find this in 1 second. What happened to all those pictures that I saved? I don't know where I saved this. Where's my phone? Deuteronomy chapter 6. So when they come out of their house, they kiss this mezuzah, and they go out to work. When they come into their house, they kiss, and they come into the house. So you see what kind of things that they have in their house, right? When we actually go to the Christian's house, and when you see the God's word in their house, what's the kind of words that you easily find in Christian's house? All right. What else? Typically, you'll see, and when you go to like 집사님's house or other people's house. Lord's Prayer. Usually what you will find is this. Job chapter 8. Verse 7. Job chapter 8, verse 7. It's written this way. Your beginnings will seem humble, so prosperous will your future be. Have you ever seen this? No? This is the most common one. So another things you will find is this. 1 Samuel chapter 31. No. Oh, this is not first. It's the first Chronicle, not first King. First Chronicle. Chapter 4. First Chronicle, chapter 4, verse 9 and on. Jabez was more honorable than his brother, his mother, and his name is Jabez, saying, I give birth to him in pain. Jabez cried out to the God of Israel, Oh, that you would bless me and enlarge my territory. Let your hands be with me and keep me from harm so that I will be free from pain. And God granted his request. Have you seen this? Right? This is the most common things you will find in Christians' house. But you will never going to find this kind of things in Israelites or Jewish house. What do they have in their house? The Deuteronomy chapter 6, the Shema is what we just read. You will always find Shema in any Israelite's house. You won't find any other things in the Bible, in their house. But if you find, this is the only thing you're going to find. So you see the difference between them and us? So what is this Deuteronomy chapter 6 is about? Love your Lord, your God, with all your heart, with all your souls, with all your strength. It is what's in their house. I barely come across in any church that have this kind of word printed on their church. Rarely I see this verse printed in anyone's house. This is how different it is for how Jewish people teach their children versus what we teach. They teach to love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, is what they teach. This is the things that God told them to put it on your forehead, put it on your arms. Remember this. Is the only thing God said to remember. But this is the things that nobody does. Let's come back to Exodus again. So now you see mezuzah. Mezuzah means door frame, by the way. It means door frame in Hebrew word. When we get to Deuteronomy, if we ever get to Deuteronomy, of course, and I will explain in details about this Deuteronomy chapter 6, but for Israelites, it is really important for them. Shema Israel is very, very important for them. And this is what God told them to put a sign and symbol on their hands. Come back to Exodus chapter 13, verse 17. When Pharaoh let the people go, God did not lead them on the road through the Philistine country, though that was a shorter, for God said, if they face war, they might change their minds and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by the desert road towards the Red Sea. The Israelites went up out of Egypt, armed for battle. Moses took the bones of Joseph, with him, because Joseph had made the sons of Israel swear an oath. He had said, God will surely come to your aid, and then you must carry my bones up with you from this place. So we covered this when we shared the story in Genesis. So I'm not going to go over any detail, but I want to go over at least the map for a second. Okay, so let's take a look at the map for a second. Let me know if you see the map. Actually, you see it? Okay. So when you look at the map, this, where it says Goshen, which is on the left side, right below the lower Egypt, you see the Goshen. And a little above, you see the Ramses. You see that? This is where they started it. And then in order for them to get to Israel, or the Canaan, is towards the right side where you see the Moab. Right above, that's the Dead Sea. This is where the Canaan is, right? So when you look at this map, if God led them through this alongside of the Mediterranean Sea, it's easier for them to reach, right? It's the quickest way to get to the Canaan. But this is not where God led them to, because the Philistines are very strong people. So this is what God said, if I lead them to Philistine land, when they get into a battle with them, they're going to be afraid and they're going to come back to Egypt again. So instead of God leading them to Philistines land, he actually led them through this Sinai, which is the Sinai Peninsula, the lower side of it in the middle. This is where God led them to go. Okay, so stop it. All right, now, gee, I can't go to chapter 14. Okay, continue on. Verse 20, after leaving Sukkot, they camped at Etham on the edge of the desert. By day, the Lord went ahead of them in a pillar of cloud to guide them on their way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light, so that they could travel by day or night. Neither the pillar of cloud by day nor the pillar of fire by night left its place in front of the people. A lot of people get confused that there was the pillar of a fire and pillar of a cloud. There are two of them, leading them. No, it's one. By day, it's a pillar of cloud was leading them. By night, this pillar of fire, or the light, was leading them. So there's only one pillar. There's not two pillars. Okay? So important thing is, when God was leading them to the desert, right? So they just follow the pillar. It's not like they just had a GPS or a map to go where they are going. They just follow this pillar. But the pillar was going in front of them, always. The pillar, whether it's a pillar of cloud or a pillar of fire, it was always in front of them. Which means God is the one who's leading their life. Right? It is not them figuring it out, where to go, how to go. The pillar is the one who's guiding them. So for them, they just have to follow the pillar. That's all they have to do. Right? Obviously, they don't know where this pillar is guiding them. They have no idea. They lived in Egypt all their life. So they never traveled to this far, so they don't know where they're going. It's not like they have the GPS systems to follow. So they had to follow the pillar. So think about this. Who is leading your life? Who is leading your life? Your experience? Your mind? Your parents? Your partners? Your friends? Or me? Who is leading your way? This is something we need to think about. Who is leading my life? Who am I following? Are you following the God's leads, or are you following your own leads? Throughout the 40 years of desert life for Israel, this is one thing that they learned. What is it? You follow this pillar. Wherever this pillar is leading you, you must follow it. But I want you to think about it. When the pillar was guiding them, was the road that they took, was the easiest road for them to get to the Canaan? Or was it the rough road, and the pillar led them for 40 years in the desert? Pillar led them for 40 years. They wander. Then our question is, why didn't God lead them directly into the Canaan? Right? It would be easier. When you looked at the map, there's an easy path, there's a shorter path to get there. But that's not how God led them to that short path. God led them through all the way out, down in Sinai Peninsula, and then go all the way up. So I want you to think about it. Is God leading my life always easiest and quickest way to get to it? Or God is leading my way to a desert? We have learned from Genesis. How did God lead Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and Joseph? How did God lead your life? Was this quickest way, easiest way to get to it? Or your life was rough? As what we have seen, your life was rough. It was like God is leading them to a desert, right? And I want you to think about it. We have to follow the pillar, but where the pillar is leading my way might not be the easiest way, might not be the quickest way, depending upon how we do. The pillar might lead us into the desert life for 40 years. So I want you to look at your life. Where are you now? Are you in Ramses? Are you in desert? Are you in Canaan? Where are you? I need you to think about this. If you truly trust the Lord is leading your way, and if you are actually following His way, obviously you have to know. And another thing, of course, God provided a pillar of a cloud by day, right? So by day, why did God provide a pillar of a cloud instead of a pillar of a light, a pillar of fire? Why did God use the pillar of cloud rather than pillar of fire during daytime? Why didn't He use one pillar? Well, this is, you live in Florida. It's desert. if you lead during the day with the pillar of fire. Yeah. If God is leading them in the pillar of fire and during the day, they will get killed, right? God is providing the, sort of like cool wind during daytime because this is very hot in the desert, right? At night, because when the sun goes down, it can get very cold. So God had to provide the fire for them to keep it warm, right? This is why God provided the pillar of a cloud by day and pillar of fire and at night, because God provided them what they need to live in the desert. Without the pillar of a cloud and without the pillar of the fire, they either be cooked or they would have been freeze, one or the other. They cannot live. So God provided them what they need. There was a shelter for them, the cool wind and the warm fire at night. But this is things that people forget. God used this pillar of a cloud and pillar of fire for 40 years. But they forget what God provided to them during those 40 years. They only complain they did not have what they want. Although God provided them for everything what they needed. What did they have? They had a manna for their food. God gave them water. God provided them pillar of a cloud and pillar of fire. But all they did was a complaint. So, if God provided a pillar of a cloud by day, right? Imagine you have to follow that pillar of a cloud. If you don't follow that pillar of a cloud, what happened to you in the desert? You'll be totally cooked, right? You'll be cooked. So you have to follow this pillar of cloud, right? You must, because if you say like, oh, you know what, I don't feel like to follow this pillar of cloud today. Like I just rather stay here in the desert. What happens to you? You'll be dead, right? When the pillar of a cloud leaves, you have to follow them if you want to live. You cannot say like, oh, I'd rather stay behind. You can't. You have to follow it. Same thing at night. When the pillar of fire, lift up and then go, then you have to follow the pillar of fire. But when the pillar of a cloud stops, what happens? What do you have to do then? You have to stop too. You can't say like, let's keep going, When the pillar of a cloud stops, you say, you know what, let's go, let's just keep going. And if the pillar of a cloud stops, you keep going, what happened? Also, you'll be cooked, you die. Right? So this is what God taught them. When I lead you, you walk with me. When I stop, you stop too. You can't just go when he stops. Well, when he stops, you go. It doesn't work that way. You have to stop when he stops. When he walks, you have to walk along with him. That's the only way you're going to survive. This is what God taught them for 40 years. When the pillar of cloud leaves, you leave. When the pillar of a cloud stops, you stop. This is why I mentioned before. Remember chapter 12, verse 50? All the Israelites did just what the Lord had commanded Moses and Aaron. You don't do anything else. You just do what God told you to do. That's all you do, period. And I want you to think about it. God is also leading your life, my life too. Where am I? Am I in the desert? Am I in Canaan? Am I in Sukkot? Where am I now? Am I going when he's going? So, our spiritual eyes has to be open to see when he's leaving. I have to follow. If I don't see him that he's leaving, obviously I'll be in trouble. Let's assume that the pillar of a cloud left, but I'm sleeping, right? So that I can't follow the cloud, then I'm dead. This is what we need to know when we pray. This is what we pray. Lord, open my spiritual eyes. When you leave, I want to leave. When you stop, I want to stop, Lord. Please help me to see your way, because you're the one who's leading my way. Understand? Okay. We're going to go over chapter 14 next week. Any questions up to this point? We cover a lot today. I mean, as always, we always cover a lot, but I don't know how much we share kind of register in your head, but we always cover a lot. So hopefully you have a chance to review the things that we have gone over, so just kind of keep it in your heart. Any question? Or everything what I explained understood? Okay. All right, so I know it was hard for every one of you to get up early in the morning to join the Bible sharing, and I thank you for that. I mean, is that bad? Saturday morning? So it's not right. So it's not too tired, right? It's in the morning. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. I don't see any of you like yawnings or anything like that. So you don't have to just. Yeah. So it's more refreshing because you just slept, right? So. Yeah. So, should we do this on Saturday morning instead, so you guys could spend time on Friday night, Saturday night, and Sunday night, so you're free? Or you rather want to sleep on Saturday morning? If it is a Saturday 11 o'clock, then that goes over our lunchtime too. For me, it's better this way. So you guys could actually spend the night, can plan something on Friday night, and then especially Saturday, either Friday night, you have a schedule all the time. Sunday night is a little, hard because the next day you have to work. Saturday night is always like iffy. Sometimes I have a schedule, sometimes you guys have a schedule. So it's up to you guys. So for next week, what should we do? Friday night, Saturday morning, Saturday night, Sunday night. Saturday night. This is I wish we can do this, but unfortunately we can't do this. Okay, let's do this. Everyone just follow me. I want you to just make a small four piece of paper. You can use any paper. It doesn't really matter which one. All right? And then write down 1, 2, 3, 4. Not in the, just one paper you put 1, second paper 2, third paper 3, fourth paper 4. Okay? I'll do the same thing. So we're going to do raffle. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and you're doing your own, so you fold it. And we're doing our own raffle here. And then you just shake it up, mix it up, and then you pick one of them. And I do the same thing. I have 4 pieces of paper like you see here. All right, I'm just gonna, do this. And then I'm just gonna pick one paper. So 1 is a Saturday night, 2 is Saturday morning, 3 is a Saturday night, and 4 is Sunday night. I just picked the paper. I came with this. Okay. Which one you have? Yeah. All right. Okay. I got 2. You got 2. And then what about Bryce? What's your number? What do you got, Yunsu? What? That's 2. So everyone picked number 2. Wow. God is leading our way. It's not coincidence, right? We just did raffle, right? Right. So I didn't know which one I picked. I just picked one of the paper. It was number 2, and you did number 2. Bryce, you picked something else or what? All right. So even if you pick something others, but still, 3 out of 4 is number 2. So definitely, we may laugh about this one, but you know what? Let me just tell you this. According to the Bible, this is how we know God's way. You know that there's multiple times in the Bible that actually did the raffle? Yeah. Even